My son told me he was still in university for 2 years, and it was not true. I found out from a bank statement that arrived by mistake. What I found when I started looking was the hardest thing of 22 years of being his father. There are things a father does without calculating the cost, without asking himself whether he can or cannot, without turning into an equation what is simply what you do because that son is that son, and because giving him what he needs to grow is part of what it means to be his father. I had worked for 22 years with that logic, not blindly, with the awareness that every peso I sent Rodrigo each month was a peso I had produced with time and work, and that he was going to use to build something I wanted him to have. A degree, a starting point, the possibility of a life with more options than mine when I started. And for 2 years those pesos had gone somewhere else. My name is Alberto. I am 53 years old. I am a bank branch manager in a northern city, and I have spent 28 years in the financial system. Rodrigo is 22 years old. He is my only child. His mother and I separated when he was 9. I raised him in alternating weeks during the school years. When he left to study in the capital at 18, I missed him in a way I did not expect to miss him given that he had already spent years between two homes. The degree was industrial engineering at a prestigious public university. For years long, he should already be in his final year, or so I thought. The bank statement arrived in an envelope clearly meant for Rodrigo. It had his name, his account number, but the address was mine. Probably because when Rodrigo had opened the account as a minor, I had appeared as co-holder and we had never updated the correspondence address. These things happen in banks. I knew that better than anyone. I opened it without thinking too much about whether I should or should not, because I was co-holder and because what I expected to find was ordinary. It was not ordinary. The bank statement showed the movements of the previous month. Income included my monthly transfer of 7,000 pesos, an additional transfer from his mother of 3,500, and 2 more income entries I did not recognize. One from a company I did not know for 4,000 pesos. One appearing as a cash deposit of 2,000 pesos. The outgoing transactions were what I stopped to review more carefully. There was no payment to the university. There was no charge corresponding to books, materials, school fees, or anything related to studying. There were rent payments to an address I did not recognize, gym payments, restaurant charges, a streaming subscription, payments to a clothing store, the spending profile of someone who lives in the city and pays their ordinary expenses, not the spending profile of a university student. I sat with the bank statement in my hand for a time. I searched in my phone for my recent conversations with Rodrigo. 3 weeks ago, he had told me he was in a period of midterm exams, that he was very busy, that he would call me when they were done. 2 months ago, he had sent me a photo of what he said was his industrial plant design homework. 4 months ago, he had told me he had passed a difficult subject and was relieved. I called the university. I asked for information about my son's enrollment status. They told me Rodrigo did not appear as an active student, that the last recorded enrollment was from 2 years ago. I sat with the phone resting against my forehead for a moment. I did not call Rodrigo that day. I needed to process what I knew before having that conversation. What I knew was the following. Rodrigo had dropped out of the degree 2 years ago. He had spent 2 years telling me he was still studying. He had spent 2 years receiving money from me and his mother under that premise. He lived in an apartment I did not know about. He had additional income from a source I did not know. And he had built a student narrative carefully enough that I had believed it completely. I called his mother. Her name was Lorena. I told her what I had discovered. There was a silence. She asked whether I was sure. I told her yes, that the university had confirmed it. Lorena took a moment more, and then she told me something I did not expect. She told me 6 months ago Rodrigo had told her he had had problems with subject, that he had asked her not to tell me because he did not want me to worry, that she had assumed it was something temporary, that she had not thought it was this. I called Rodrigo that night, not with the intention of accusing him from the start, with the intention of listening. He answered on the 3rd ring. I asked him how everything was going. He told me fine, that he was studying. I told him I had received his bank statement by mistake, that I had reviewed it, that the movements did not correspond to what he had described to me, that I had called the university. Silence. A long silence. Then he told me he was sorry, that he needed to see me, that there were things he needed to tell me. I told him I was coming to the capital that weekend, that he was right, that we needed to talk in person. That weekend, I went to the city where Rodrigo lived. He received me at the apartment I did not know. It was a small but tidy apartment, with evidence of a life that was not that of a student, but that was not disastrous either. We sat down, and what Rodrigo told me over the following hour and a half was the most honest thing he had told me in 22 years. He told me he had started having problems with the degree from the second semester of his second year, that the advanced mathematics required for industrial engineering had turned out to be much harder than he had calculated, that he had failed subjects, that he had entered a cycle of failing and retaking that had exhausted him, that at some point he had decided to stop going to class, but had not found a way to tell me, that he knew what I had sacrificed to send him to study, that he had seen in my face each time we talked about his degree something that had seemed to him like the dream I had for him, that he had not known how to tell me that dream was not going to happen the way both of us had thought, that he had preferred to continue with the lie while he found a way to resolve his situation, that the 2 years that had passed he had used to work and save, that he was considering changing careers, that he had some ideas but did not yet have a concrete plan, that he had been afraid that if he told me I would withdraw my support, that he had been even more afraid of disappointing me. I listened to all of that, without interrupting, without reacting in the way the pain of the moment wanted me to react, with the attention of someone who is receiving information that requires time before any response is useful. When Rodrigo finished, I told him I needed a few minutes. I got up. I went to the bathroom. I washed my face. I looked at the mirror for a time, and then I came back. I told Rodrigo 4 things. The first, that what he had done had been a betrayal of the trust one had placed in him. Not only economic, though also economic. There had been 2 years of a relationship between us built on a premise that was not true. 2 years of conversations where I had believed I knew what he was living when I did not. That had a weight that was not resolved by an apology, even if the apology was genuine. The second, that I understood the fear he described to me. That I understood he had carried something that weighed enormously for 2 years. That it did not justify it, but that I understood it. The third, that the money he had received during those 2 years under the premise that he would study needed to be paid back. Not all at once, because that was not possible, but with a concrete commitment and a real payment structure. That was non-negotiable. The fourth, that if he had a plan for his life that was not the industrial engineering I had imagined, I was willing to listen. That I had never wanted my dream for him to become a burden that prevented him from finding his own path. That if that had contributed to his not being able to tell me the truth, that was also something I needed to examine. Rodrigo cried, not performatively, in the way someone cries who has been carrying something too long and can finally let it go. He told me he was ashamed to have reached this point, that he had wanted to tell me the truth many times, that each time fear had won. I told him I believed him, and that was also information about something both of us needed to change in how we communicated. What followed was a process that is still ongoing. Rodrigo is paying back the money in a structured way. Not to me, to an account that we both agreed would be to fund a new stage of his education when he had clarity about what direction he wanted to take. He is working at something that, according to what he tells me, genuinely interests him. We are having conversations we did not have before. About what he wants. Not about what I want for him. About what he wants. Those conversations are more uncomfortable than the ones we had before. They're also more real. What cost me most of this entire process was not the money or the 2 years of lying. It was the question I asked myself when everything came to the surface. Had I created the conditions for my son to feel he could not tell me the truth about one of the most important things in his life? The honest answer was yes. That somewhere in the conversations about the degree, I had projected a dream for him that was genuine, but that was also mine. That Rodrigo had felt it as an expectation he could not disappoint. And that expectation had weighed more than the possibility of an honest conversation. That is something I'm still processing. Not to excuse what he did, but because it is my part in the story. And my part in the story also deserves to be named. What I want you to take from this story has parts for very different people. For parents with children at the age of building their path. The expectations we project about our children's achievements are love. And they can also be a pressure that makes the honest conversation about what is not working harder than the lie that avoids it. It is not possible to eliminate expectations, but it is possible to be explicit that difficult conversations are welcome, that failure on one path does not close all paths, that what matters most is not the outcome, but the honesty of the process. For children who are carrying something they have not told their parents, the conversation you are afraid of is almost always less devastating than the period of silence that precedes the truth arriving by another route. Because when the truth arrives by another route, the problem is no longer only the original problem. It is also the time that passed without their saying it. And that time has its own weight that adds to the rest. If this story touched you, comment. Do you believe parents, without meaning to, sometimes create pressures about their children's academic or professional achievements that make it harder for those children to tell them the truth when things are not working? Like if you believe honesty between parents and children about failures is more valuable than the image of success both sometimes prefer to maintain. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who is a parent of a young adult and who might benefit from reflecting on this type of dynamic. Reflection to take with you. The love you put into the dreams you have for your children is real. It can also become a burden when they feel those dreams are expectations that cannot disappoint. Explicitly creating the space for a child to be able to tell you something is not working is not giving up on wanting things to go well for them. It is giving them the possibility that when something fails, they come to you before the lie grows to be exactly what is described in this story.